Are we ready? Thumbs up. Good. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning and bienvenue à Paris. That's as much French as you're going to get out of me today. This is the 11:30 session, and it's for an hour and a half. I'm very conscious of what Ms. Rubio mentioned just before the break, that the time before lunch is when judges become very anxious. So hopefully, please bear with us, okay? But a fantastic food option is available to you after this. So my name's Warren Smith. I'm the Director of the Digital Marketplace from the UK government, and also I head up the Global Digital Marketplace Programme. And we've got an exciting session ahead of you now before lunch, I'm sure. It's going to be broken into effectively 3 sections where we have 3 areas of discussion. And I'm very fortunate, and as are you, to be joined by a prestigious set of experts on the panel here, and I'm just going to introduce them now. So we have Mihai Fazekas, who is the Assistant Professor, Central European University, and Director of Government Transparency Institute. We have Beatrice Sanz-Rajado, who's the Director for Investigative Support from the European Anti-Fraud Office. And we have Marcelo Drago from the Chilean Transparency Council, who's the president. So we're going to start with an initial session opened by Marcelo. And really what we're drilling into is the subject matter around how data and new and emerging technologies have really transformed the way that governments are able to tackle and identify corruption from occurring. And also, we're going to look at how some of the success factors and the commonalities of what we seem to be possible, as well as the pitfalls to avoid in implementing concrete examples for how we can actually tackle corruption using open data and emerging technologies. So, without further ado, I'll hand over to Marcelo, who's going to give the 5-minute presentation, and then that will open up the conversation. What we will have is an opportunity for the audience to ask questions, and we'll answer them for 10 minutes for each of the sessions, and then we'll wrap up in time for lunch. So over to Marcelo.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this session. Let's just get started. In Chile, we have been developing an ecosystem on integrity that is in part, an important part, based on information disclosed. So we have a Freedom of Information Act, we have a lobbying regulation that basically is information disclosed, assets and interest declarations, more information, more data around, and we realized that we are delivering several data sets, every time more complex, every time more deep. So information disclosed should go together with technology, and in order to really take advantage of this kind of systems. And the more sophisticated, the more large the data set, more sophisticated should be the tools and the information tool that we have to use. We have some of the system that we are running today. I want to show very quick two of them that are already in use, and a third one that is going to be in use, we expect, at the end of the year. We have a lobby law that is basically focused on authorities, not the lobbyist. It's a quite weird thing. It's not regulating the lobbyist. But basically, expect that the public authority issue a record of the meetings that they have with lobbyists. So they issue this, and as well as gifts and travels. So every time that they meet a lobbyist, they have to issue a record of the meeting, the people that attend the meeting, the topic, etc. And we in the Transparency Council, deliver this data to the public in a platform, in a system. In the beginning, we have 1,000 records. After that, we have 10,000 records. After that, we have 100,000 records. When you get this data, you can do some things. When you have more data, you can do different things. When you get 1 million records, that's the record that we have today, you can do entirely different things. So in the beginning, we have this system that didn't really want to it wasn't really satisfying. It shows the records, but in an isolated manner, fragmented each by each one, and didn't really show what we wanted to know. So we thought how to make the data talk. The data, and when we have this million record, we said, okay, now we have big data. Let's do this talk. And what we want to do, to know who are the lobbyists, who were they lobbying to, on what issues, what matters, who were hiring these lobbyists, behalf of who they are doing lobby. So not on them information that was in the beginning in the law, but was hidden around there in these records. So we changed completely the system. This is the old system, of course, all in open standard, etc. But that was only the beginning. Later we changed it for a system that is currently undergoing. You can use it in the internet, and the data start to talk. So basically, in a few clicks, you can know who were doing lobby. This is an example, I think, on Uber company. So one click, and you have the main lobbyists of Uber, who were Uber doing lobbying on, in what issues, over what state agencies, etc., etc. And later you go to the Uber records directly. So basically, we managed to do this talk. You can do it in several different ways, but basically we managed to deliver a system that from large amounts of information show what is going on in lobbies in Chile in a very easy way, not expecting that a sophisticated NGO or engineer download the data, try to cross the information to really show what were going on. This is another company of lobbies. One click, you have all the people that works in that company, those extracted not from a record that they have to issue, but for thousands of records that the authorities have to issue because of the meetings. And the data talk, and the media, the NGOs, the regular people start to use it in the way that it's supposed to work on, showing what is going on the lobby activity in Chile. Later we have this info prohibida. I'm going to be very quick on this. This is a system that we share with the General Controller of Chile, here present, by the way. Hello, my colleague from Chile. And so the General Control gathered the information, electronic information, on assets and interests of every authority in Chile. Plenty information, 1,000 of data. So what was the important there? Two things, the pictures and the movie. The pictures of interest, what is the people related to, and the interest that can, bias their decisions, and later the assets. That in the assets, the important thing was the movie. How the movements was there. So we add these tools to compare the movements of assets through this system. So basically you have you can compare the very first declaration and the last one. Every authority has several declarations because they have to issue one in the beginning, when they start, when they leave the position, yearly as well, so everyone have at least 4 or 5 declarations. So we managed to have a system that easily, with a couple of clicks, can compare the assets of any authority in Chile very easy with using this information tool. I am running out of time, but this is a very short thing. We are thinking in big data terms. We are trying to show how this is going to be used from the integrity point of view, from scrutiny from the public. So we developed this last system that is in project that basically plays all together, interests, relatives, assets, meetings, public procurement or contracting, lobbyists, companies that hire lobby, actually former authorities, sharing companies, former jobs, sanctions, gifts, etc., etc. And basically, you have, this is it's not working already, but this is going to be at the end of the year. You have a main big picture of every person in Chile that have relation with the public sector, contracting, doing lobby, being an authority, being and they're going to show a complete 360 degrees view of their interest, their relationship, their hirings, to show if there's something around there that is odds to integrity or everything is going okay. So when you have light, light is the very best disinfectant, and we think using big data tools, we can offer much more light to the public in Chile. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcelo. I think that's very interesting and links back to a lot of things that we heard in the plenary session around the importance of transparency, of beneficial ownership, and people of significant control. And I like what you've said about making the data talk. So it's how you can spot these insights. So I think just as a reflection on that, Beatrice, how do you see that being relevant to what you've seen or comparable to what you've seen in your context?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. What we've seen now is that we have to deal with data in a different way. Before we had sets of data that were manageable, and we could analyze it, we could filter it, we could do correlations. But now we need to have data talking and to have data being very dynamic and be able to consult it in a very dynamic way. So I think complex database relationships is something that we are working on. More and more we're doing word analytics. So when we need to know if a company, for example, in OLAF, we are investigating a project, a company, a person, if we need to know something about that, is by word analytics. It's not just by going into different databases and trying to find the person. We don't have the time. And it's not efficient. So what we've done in OLAF, and we are trying to increase even more, is really to have a data lake that we are trying to build into a real data warehouse where we can really say, okay, we're looking for a company, and then actually it really pops in the different databases that we have access to, and those are member states databases, commission databases, commercial databases, to really go and have the information available to be analyzed. And I think that's the way to tackle corruption today.
Thank you. Spot on. Mihaly, what would you say on that point?
Yeah, first of all, great, thank you very much for being able to be here. And being the academic on the panel, I will start from one step further away and try to remind us of the two major things for which we can use data analytics. The first thing is investigations. We can use data to target investigations, provide data, right? What Beatrice mentioned, like you are interested in a company, then here is big data and it gives you a lot of information, right? That was number one. Number two is supporting policy. And we used to using data, okay, here is an analysis, a report, then something happens, and 5 years down the line, we see if the policy worked, right? But then with big data, we can check policy effectiveness in real-time basis in a couple of weeks, in a couple of months, and adjust on the go, right? It really gives us a very different potential to use big data for supporting policy. Now, once you understand that there are these two broad branches, and these broad branches have very different expectations of the data, very different analytical tools and visualization tools behind, I would like to highlight 3 success factors for successful uses of big data for anti-corruption, for corruption risk management and assessment. And my background is mainly in public procurement, government contracts, and related databases like company data sets. So I will stick to this area and bring the 3 topics. So the first one is clear problem understanding, action orientation, knowing what you really want to do. Big data sets are big, hence it's very easy to get lost. So the first thing is that you really clarify what you want to get out of it, right? And one example which I really liked is a recent work we have done with the European Investment Bank when auditors wanted to find the right cases to investigate through their proactive integrity reviews, right? The question was very clear. And they brought together various data sets, including public procurement risk records for something like 500,000 contracts, right? You really want to know where to look, because if you have a couple of thousand entities, a couple of hundreds of thousands of contracts, and very limited investigative resources, it's no easy business to figure out where to start. The second example I want to give, and then the second success factor, is realistic expectations of the data, right? We talk about big data, AI, all this, but actually often the data is messy, is missing, you cannot link even if you would like to link, right? There are all sorts of problems. The reality is actually a lot more depressing than what, you know, the buzzwords would suggest. And in this respect, I really like the project we've done in Poland with the Stefan Batory Foundation, where we developed a risk scoring dashboard for civil society and journalists. And there we started off very, very ambitious. We will look for breaches of the law, we will look for very detailed things. And here is an example. We wanted to look at simple breaches of the law in terms of not following contract value thresholds and regulations. In public procurement, contract values determine which regulatory framework to apply. And then we looked at the contract values, which you need to understand, which rules to follow. And it turns out half of them were including VAT, other half were not including VAT. And there was no way to figure out which one had VAT, which one didn't have VAT. Simple basic mistake in the data itself, but then it just prevented us from applying risk analytics in that particular respect. So, understanding how far you can push data and data analytics and building data systems to support your analytical needs, I think is a very fundamental success factor. And finally, I'm closing with this. Often, big data AI is presented as the new thing which will change everything. However, the reality is, in my practice, is the most effective solutions come by when you combine existing, often qualitative assessments with big data. And in this respect, one work we have done together with the OECD for the Mexico City Airport Group is a good example, because the airport group used to have a very structured but mainly qualitative risk management, contract implementation risk management system, which functioned, but they just felt like sometimes it's not rigorous enough, right? And then when you link that up with data, and then we brought risk assessment for a couple of 100,000 contracts, for a couple of thousand suppliers they were having, then you really get a strong combination of something which people are familiar working with and something new which enhances of what they do already, right? This combination of linking to what risk assessment and risk management is going on already and the new data, I think it's a powerful combination. Thank you.
Thank you, Mihai. Yeah, so that's some very relevant and powerful perspectives. And just on your final point, if I could reflect, certainly in the UK, we have seen significant improvements in public service delivery through the combination of being driven by better quality data, but when combined with service design, citizen-centered services, it's a very powerful enabler for change. So thank you. That kind of concludes round one discussions between us, and there's an opportunity to open up the floor for questions and answers. So I think if we can have one or two, say 3 maximum questions for the panel. If you could stand up and introduce yourself and who you're directing the question to, that would be hugely beneficial and welcome. So there's microphones around, so hands up who would like to ask any questions around what you've heard so far. There's one over there, gentleman with his arms up.
David Ireland with Trace International. I commend the Chilean for their effort in Chile. It shows the La Seriedad Chilena. Of course, we want the data to speak. How about those voices that don't want to be heard? I'm thinking of companies that don't want to be known to be lobbying. Monsanto has been very covert in its activities. The French press have been very diligent in explaining to the public the lobbying that Monsanto does, now Bayer, as part of an association. I'm thinking of the Wikipedia model, whereby people are invited to contribute. So engaging with the press to ensure that the lobbyists are duly registered and that they are known for their association with companies, if indeed the companies aren't directly registered. So have you investigated this means to ensure that those who are lobbying are correctly associated with the companies that are funding them?
Yeah.
Thank you for your question. The good thing, the bad thing and the good thing of the Chilean model is the same issue. It's not based on the lobbyists, but on the authorities that have to declare their meetings. So if there's if Monsanto or any other, I don't want to talk about particular companies, but any company that don't want to really show what is going on and try to use different ways to try to approach authorities, in some point of the process, there's going to be a footprint. In some point, in the meeting, they say, like the example, and the public authority that issued the record wrote their Monsanto. So the system will allow you to get to that record or to get all the records that Monsanto is involved of any other company, let's say Coca-Cola. And it doesn't rely in a proper declaration of this company to issue to register first and later to update information or to issue declarations of their activities. Chilean lobbyist company they don't have to do any of those. It's not really necessarily a good or bad thing, but at the end it relies in the authorities that are, receive the lobbyists on their records of the meetings, and at the end, when there's one meeting, maybe a company can hire was 2, 3, but there's plenty, somehow the data start to talk, and you can say what is going on.
Thank you. Yes, quickly, there's another question here.
I really like this question because I think it talks to a broader issue, right? Like missing data more broadly. And I think what Beatrice mentioned in the introductory statement, that we need to link together different data sets. I think data linking is key in data, and especially if you want to use administrative data, large data sets for fraud and corruption measurement, then linking data is the way to triangulate the reliability of your data, reliability of your indicators. And in this sense, I think the Chilean example shows this, right? If you link together different data sets, the chances are at least in one of them, you will catch a footprint, a sign of the kind of data point you are looking for.
Yeah, totally agree. Linked data automatically using unique identifiers. Question over here. Mike.
Hello, I'm Jimena Reyes. I'm the director for the Americas at the International Federation for Human Rights, and I have a question for Mr. Fasecas. One of the threats to democracy linked to corruption is the issue of state capture through corruption and structure of the state capture through corruption by third parties. You have done some work on methodologies based on data to measure state capture. Can you tell us a bit about it? And also, if from your last article, there's been some more reflections on this issue of measurement. Thank you.
To clarify, we didn't coordinate about this call, okay? Thank you very much for the question. I think it's a fundamental one. And this is also fundamental because where big data is particularly powerful is to move from an individual case to the large picture, the state capture phenomenon. And in this respect, my work, which is one example, and others are working on similar analysis, shows that if you identify individual cases of corruption or risky transactions, risky organizations, and then you map the network of organizations and transactions which are high risk, then you have a sense of how widespread corruption is and how systemic corruption is, right? So you can have the same amount of corruption in a country, one which is randomly distributed corrupt transactions, and another one which is highly clustered, driven by tightly knit networks. And this is where we talk about state capture, where corruption has become systemic, taking hold, taking control of some part of the public sector. And I think where the fundamental policy conclusions flow from this is that even if we have the best investigators, if you have a case, a network of corrupt actors amounting to state capture, then removing some high-risk entities won't change the logic of the system. Corruption and state capture will remain intact as a systemic phenomenon. The norm will remain to be corruption. In these cases, you need systemic solutions, right? Investigations typically work where you have an otherwise open and transparent, universalistic norm of competition and access to public resources, and there are some deviations, some corrupt acts, right? In this case, you remove those, and then you maintain the overall open standards. But if you have state capture, this is largely ineffective. You need a systemic solution.
Thank you, Mihai. Any final questions on this round? One at the back.
Morning. Morning, I'm Peter Courtney from the FBI, United States. Question for Mr. Aguirre. The Chilean Info Lobby website was really impressive, and I was wondering if you could first walk us through the evolution from paper records to that kind of website. You could sort of convince government workers to input data in a digital way to create the sort of solutions that you have. And then if you can give us a sense for the scope of, I guess, your office staffing and cost, so we can show how this isn't a beyond the realm of possibilities solution.
Nice to see, Marcelo.
What you mentioned is key. I mean, you have to get rid of PDFs, otherwise this doesn't work at all. I mean, this is not an electronic solution, PDF, and to sign something in paper, it doesn't really help later. So the system is completely electronically, and the information is gathered electronically from the very beginning, and there's no any paper around. So it's set up in the beginning to gather information and later to create this data set that can be mining afterwards quite easily. It's not, ¿cuántos son? Son como son 300 millones de pesos. It should be around, no, it's in Chilean pesos. But I will say that it's not quite expensive. It's not, of course, cheap, the system, but it's not quite expensive. It's not something that you really can pay. I mean, we have a proper budget for that, and it never have been an issue, the cost of the system. And the public, because of this is based on the public authorities, public servants, they have to do what the law says, they have to do what our regulations said, so they have to issue the information in the way that we ask, and they don't mind at all. I mean, there's not an issue to doing this, because at the end, it's just another, it's a burden anyway, it's quite a lot workload, but in this point, for them it's not an issue to deliver the information as long as the information is used adequately. And now they are really confident. They really like the new system because it shows what it's supposed to show, the lobbyist and the lobbyist activity. No, the single minister that received, I don't know, 20 lobbyists, that somehow the focus was on the authority and on the activity of the lobby.
Thank you, Marcelo. Great example of crowdsourcing some currency calculations there as well. So that concludes round one. So thank you very much for that. So we're going to move on to round two, and really this kind of leads on from some of the things that were spoken about this morning around, yes, it's easy to set new standards and policies and commitments, but actually practically, concretely, how does that translate into practical action on the ground? And that's something that we'd like to explore in this session here. So I think if we could perhaps go to Beatrice with some examples of what you've seen to be practical, real, tangible examples of change in tackling corruption in this way. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I can give you 2 or 3 examples, and then we will drill down if there is some interest in the audience of how we've been looking at fraud and corruption. Because in our case, when we start an investigation, it might be coupled, it might be fraud, or it might be corruption, but the tools that we will use are the same. One of the very important investigation that we did was on the basis of all the information that the Panama Papers released. As we know, there was this consortium that released all the papers, and with loads of data inside. And as Olaf, we wanted to know what was the ethical standards of the European Commission public servants. because if there are data and if there were people involved, it was going to be a reputational risk, apart from corruption and fraud, for the institutions. So we downloaded all the data, and we link it with all the stakeholders, so institutions, directors, payment officers, more than 300,000 people. And it was very difficult because the Panama Papers, for those who have gone actually into the database, you have the names in their language. So we had to convert everything and every single name in what we have. And for example, my name, you can put an X at the end, a Z at the end, a ZE at the end. You can put San Redrado with an iPhone together, separate. So we had to do a lot of cleaning of data, but also building different possibilities and work with intelligent search and intelligent data that could really give all the possible matches. So we did that, and then we start looking also for drilling down to identify if there was some key people in the European institutions that could be concerned by that. And then we opened some investigations, and then the thing flow. But without that information, or without the capacity also to look at what exists outside and how we can use it for the purpose of our office, we wouldn't have identified those issues. Okay. It was not very conclusive in the sense that it was very good for us because it showed that very little people were in this database, but there were. And then we investigated when it was needed to investigate. So that's one of the issues that, or one of the things that we did. Another initiative that shows also how we have to work together with different institutions is a project that we have, and is working quite well with the World Bank, which is linking data of the recipients of funds. The European Commission provides grants for research, or for different purposes, and the World Bank also. And we pay those grants on the basis of a study, a research, and the same research could be presented to the World Bank, and they will get funding, and to the European Commission, and they will get funded. And as such, it's not fraud, but together it is a fraud because we are not using the money that we have to the best use that is possible. So we have an exchange of data, which was very difficult to put in place because of data protection issues, because we are exchanging personal data with an international organization that is not a European organization. So it took quite a lot of time to put in place a system that could work, but it's working well. Every month we are identifying hits, and then we share those information to see if there is an issue or not, and to act and redirect the funds where needed to be. So those are two issues that we are tackling. We can discuss more if you want, but I don't want to take more than time.
Thank you, Beatrice. And just following on from that, Marcelo, it was great to see in your opening presentation the use of the data by NGOs, by media organizations, so kind of practically finding opportunities to hold government to account for perhaps decision-making that perhaps could be questioned. So in doing so, what would you say is the importance of the external actors in this space, and what are perhaps some of the challenges that you've encountered that could be overcome by others?
The external actions in this matter from our system are key. They are the base of the system. This is an information disclosure system. So basically, we spread the information and anyone can take it and use it and trying to analyze it in the better said way that they think on. So it's based on them. And I will say the main effect is a preventive effect, because it's not that they are going to find a corruption scheme necessarily, or a conflict of interest quite obvious. It's because when the authorities and the ones that interact with the public sector, procurement, or that are regulated, etc., they just stop to do some several kind of things because they know that it will be very easy to show that what is going on. They're going to be exposed. So there's a change of behavior. But basically, that is because anyone can search, everyone can look, and everybody can take a deep look of what is going on there.
Thank you, Marcelo. I think, and I noticed from your presentation that all the data is available in JSON or CSV format, so making it open and I think is absolutely key.
Yes, but we realize that that's not the end, but it's starting point, because it have to be in that way. But it's not that if you deliver in that way and you place it that way, it's going to be used. Not. It's not necessarily. It's have to anyway. It's an open data standards, but you have to be quite sophisticated anyway, or have a technical knowledge enough to use it properly. So some NGOs can use it, maybe one or two media. We wanted to use it broadly, from 1,000 people, not a couple of people. And so you have to deliver the system to use it properly and not expect the other just to run their own systems.
That's a hugely important point. I suspect we'll come back to around skills and capability and capacities to be able to derive value from data, and increasingly large amounts of data, but not just humans, machines as well. So, Mihaly, any reflections on this from what we've heard so far?
Yeah, actually quite many reflections, and honestly, we talked about success cases, but many times these initiatives fail, and because it's bloody difficult, right? Having a lot of data is not easy to handle. Having a lot of messy data is even harder to handle. So I wanted to offer a few key challenges around data and skills, and some of the solutions we have found in a couple of concrete projects. So talking about data and what problems can be with data and what you can do about this, I would like to draw on the example with the Mexico City airport and the OECD, which you can read about in this nice report. Nice tiny bit of marketing, but okay. But the point is that this draws very important lessons. So about data, the first question is what data is available, what data is being collected. We tend to think with big data and electronic, social media and all sorts of, health apps and everything. And at the end of the day, everything is data. Well, we are not really there yet, right? So knowing what exactly is collected, what the regulations around those. Such as in public procurement contract values, or in company registers, whether anonymous trusts have to record their owners. Anonymous trust, obviously not, right? So, these kind of things are super important to know what you can do. The scope of your risk assessment and data-driven risk management is determined by this. The second thing is the format the data is available. The PDFs were mentioned, which are terrible format. Then we could mention CSVs, which basically something you can open in your Excel on your laptop. And JSON was mentioned. I don't know how many of you has opened the JSON file in this room. Okay.
It's more than have written software.
More than what I expected, no? Very good, right? So, JSON is great to store data. It's very efficient, very flexible, but it's very hard to work with, right? So in a Mexico City airport case, we had some data in CSV, some data in JSON. Some of that was overlapping in terms of the same contract being in both data sets. Some were not, right? So obviously we have an issue of unique identifiers, which were unique in 90% of the cases, but not in 10, right? So what do? Then you kind of approximate matching based on tender and contract descriptions, which is messy, but can be done with a certain precision, right? So knowing what format the data is, what it refers to is crucial, and then linking the data, again pointing back to this, I think this underlined sufficiently enough. And then the third thing is having access to the data. It's one thing to have a data set which you would love to have. It's in the right format, but can you access it? And I'm not just talking about GDPR and personal data, but in the Mexico case, there is a good quality, or supposedly good quality, company registry with even financial information. We couldn't access that, right? Because it was not public information. In some countries, it is public information. In some, it's not, right? So really knowing what can be accessed, even for government, because let's not underestimate the barriers, the ministerial barriers, that one ministry holds this data, the one doesn't have it, have to request it, and actually the data never arrives, right? So this is actually a lot more challenging than what you would imagine. Okay, so the next point is skills. So it's one thing to develop a fancy dashboard, and I really like the Chilean example, and people find it cute and useful, but it's quite a different thing to get people to use it in their daily policy making, investigations, what have you, right? And this is, I think, a barrier which very few projects actually pass, right? Moving from a nice, colorful dashboard to something which is used on a daily basis. And in this respect, I would like to underline that we all talk about skills, but what kind of skills do we really need? And I think governments need two, or NGOs need two distinct set of skills. One is the data analyst, right? Who knows what JSON is, who knows how to clean data, link data, analyze data, right? We don't need many of these people, say 2, 3 in a ministry, those who can maintain these data sets, answer questions, who can update the data. And the larger pool of people we need, and is still with quite some skills, is those everyday users who are sophisticated users. Because often what I see is kind of this miraculous, magical thinking, oh, big data will solve all our problems. Well, not really, right? It will help you in some things, but you have to understand its limits, what you can use it for, what you cannot use it for. So educating ordinary users, and I have to say even people with any quantitative background, that's absolutely crucial, because without that, people will not trust it, and we're talking about trust, right? Talking about trust and using it with trust and sophistication is absolutely crucial. Thank you.
Well said. I think that's a nice summary to this round. Thank you very much. So we'll open up again to the floor for questions and answers. So we have 10 minutes. So who would like to go first? Gentleman here in the fourth row. Thank you.
Thank you. I am Bruno González from the Anti-Fraud Office of Catalonia, and it's a question for Beatriz Sanz. A few words about how you deal with the data protection problem in the World Bank project. And specifically, I've heard, in fact, it was from analysis from Olaf, an argument that seems to me to be really powerful. It was the idea that with big data analytics, there is no breach of privacy, of data protection, because with a so powerful algorithm, well-tuned with the good parameters, only the machine is looking to the data and find the matches, but no one, no human, nobody will know the data that is supposed to be protected. Was that the solution to your problem, or was the classical problem, the purpose was fair, and finally the European Data Protection Authority say, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, very interesting point. The EDPS didn't say okay at the beginning, so he was very concerned to passing of personal data for two reasons. Is that, as you know, Beatriz Sanz, you can have 1,200 in Spain, and it's not because there is a hit that the person is the same. So what we agreed with him is that there was a hit, no hit message, and that's how this system works. First of all, there is, the machine is going to find matches, and then it goes into a small team of 2 people that will analyze if it's a real or a false match by looking at the data that we have, date of birth, email, well, different things. And then we send it to each head of unit of the investigation in the World Bank and in Olaf, and then they discuss. And only if they agree that it is for the same project, for a same project or the same study that has been done for the same person, then the information is passed and is decided who is going to be investigated, if it's the World Bank or if it's us. Now, on the second part of your question about the big data and the analytics, I think that if we use machine learning, then we can get over many issues with the GDPR and the data protection, because then you are really, you are not tackling individual data, but you're tackling more a process and really flagging what it needs to be flagged, which is what the border control is doing now. Before, we had to go present the passport, the person look at us with glasses, without glasses, and then he will allow us in or not. And corruption is easy on those cases. Because as I said, I come from audit, internal audit, so I say everyone has a price. It's just a matter of where you put the level. So now what we are doing is that we're going through machines, and the machines are scanning where you come from, where have you been before, what is your data, they are checking in different databases to see if you have to be controlled or not. And if you have to be controlled, normally it's going to be allocated to a random customs officer, which then is much more difficult to pass through if you shouldn't pass through. So we think that the control is much weaker because it's just a machine where all the machine that is behind and all the controls that are being done at real time, they are just much more than the guy that is just checking your passport. So I think in that sense, many issues of data protection can be solved with machine learning and with big data, but still when we are talking about specific people and identifying them, then we need to be careful.
Thank you. Any further questions for this round? Lady at the front. Thank you.
Hello. I'm from Greece. I'm working for the Hellenic Court of Audit. It's the supreme audit institution of Greece. The Chilean example was, in my opinion, like a miracle, because I cannot understand how do you have so good hardware everywhere to work with an advanced software. Because in my country it is, we have hardware 15 years old, they're very outdated. So you have to work with a very old hardware, so you cannot use advanced technology. That's a part. As for the skills, which is the subject right now, I'm sure some people, I'm skilled on that as a data analyst. I'm not sure that many people in my side, my institution, can do that, and I'm not sure if we can afford that, because the country is in crisis. In case of migration and refugees, which is an all of perhaps matter, we cannot always tell who is who, since most of them don't have passports or don't tell their names. So behind all of that, in my opinion, the problem is that the data that are omitted, not the data that they have. And in the Greek case, European Court of Audit did conduct an audit on the financial crisis of Greece. European Commission gave some answers, but the European Central Bank denied to give data for the decisions, as well as the Euro working groups. I don't know if you can give an answer for all of this. Thank you.
Is that a question for Marcelo? Or,
for everyone, okay. Whoever can.
For us all, yeah.
A lot of great points, so I just pick up, randomly some of those. So these advanced analytical skills are expensive, right? So if you want to hire someone who knows how to code in Python, I don't know how many of you have known this programming language, it's very expensive, right? And banks will pay a lot more, or some other private sector entities will pay a lot more than government. So that's why I made this point that it's one thing to develop the system, right, where you need these hard skills. But then for the ordinary user, we have to make these systems user-friendly enough. They don't need to know how to code Python, right? They need to know what the distribution is, how an average is, what the outliers are, kind of understand the basics of visualizations, basics of some quantitative insights and quantitative analysis. And I think it's possible, right? You can train a wide variety of people to have become sophisticated users, kind of informed users, and then have a few people who actually develop the system and maintain the system. And here, it's just absolutely personal comment and observation. The project I've seen, which were driven by pure data scientists without understanding of what corruption is, and what the underlying administrative processes are, those tend to be, not necessarily failures, but they don't really successful. It really works best if the data analyst is engaged, knows what corruption is, and wants to fight corruption, and really is doing the data analysis work for the policy purpose, for the investigative purpose. And in that sense, I think appealing to the public good is absolutely crucial here. And then maybe you get the best Python programmers for a lower price because they want to do good, right? That's what I believe in. Yeah.
Bitches.
I agree with you, and actually in Olaf the biggest training budget is my forensic and analyst, to tell you the truth, because it might be different if you are in the public sector in policy or just as a user, but if you're investigating, you need to know every technology. When we go to an economic operator, or when we go to the Ministry of Finance or the Ministry of Employment or the Ministry of whatever, we don't know if we're going to be finding iPhones, Hawaii, Samsung, or what are we going to find, which version. Sometimes we find things that we don't even have because they're super old. So people have to be capable, and that costs money. And the other thing is, I agree with you absolutely that it has to be user-friendly for the people that are going to be using the results or the system to understand. But then we really need good people that do algorithms. And the users need to understand the decisions the machine is taking. If they are telling you have to control that, you need to understand why. Because otherwise, no one is going to rely on that. And we have to be very careful with creating bias. And also, it is a constant investment, because the computer, once it's programmed, it doesn't change. We evolve. If we see that, okay, there is this line and people are going through that line, we're going to react. The machine has to be trained. The machine has to know how to react, and we have to make it update. So it is expensive, but that's the only way forward, because that's the ecosystem where we are. And that's why I think in the European Union, we have to concentrate and to work together, and we have a long way to go for that, because otherwise there is not a single state that can afford what we need to do. So I think that's the way forward.
Marcelo, a point?
Just a few comments. Chile is not a country with large public budgets or really money that we can just spend around. We have to focus, we have to be careful of our budgets or expenditures. This system, help me with the math, is the cost was around 400,000 euros to set up the entire system, and later it's just maintenance. So, and basically we did it in-house. There's a small part out higher with external consultants. Basically was the static part, but the proper development of the information system was in-house development. So I don't know. We have the advantage that the Transparency Council is an independent agency that doesn't have to with a budget that is part of the public budget, but we get this budget and we manage how to allocate the resources as our will, because it's part of our independency. And we think in that moment is going to be a priority, and we did it.
Thank you. So one final question, nice and succinct, please. The gentleman here in the front, thank you.
Hi, I'm Daniel from Chile. I'm a student from the Center of Study of Corruption from Sussex in Brighton. You talk a lot of the opportunities about tech solutions against corruption, but I was thinking that corrupted agents are not passive actors. So they have a lot of capacity to adaptability to these measures. They can also change law or change conventions or go analog, you know. So have you experience about, you know, thinking about this idea of adaptation from corrupt actors? Because I think they have more freedom to change, so they're more fast than governments. And yeah, that's the point of adaptability.
I will do a very quick question, and then maybe you want to say something. But of course, and that's the problem between the fraudsters and the people corrupted and us, is that we have to follow the law, and we have to follow procedures and laws and regulations, and they don't care. They have the money, they have the means, they have the opportunity, and they just go. So, and that's why we have to think how to do a lawmaking quicker, and that's by, I think, what he explained about doing impact analysis or making talk the data, so that we really try to, that's a way also to speeding the decision making process. We try to anticipate things, and we're also trying to anticipate when we are putting in place something, which can be or raising red flags or putting a control, how the fraudsters are going to adapt, and then trying to put other lockers elsewhere. But we know that they will always be ahead of us. It's like a child. They will always try to get into and they will always, some of them succeed. So we just have to be reactive enough and never sleep, always being thinking about what are the new ways with this technology. And that's why the training budget is so important, because you have to know what's going on. You have to know what are the new dangers and how things are evolving from a law enforcement control, but also from a fraudster control. So I always say you need to think, how will I defraud? If you don't have that in your mind, you are a bad auditor or investigator, because you need to put yourself in their shoes to know how will you do it. And if there is no control, then we need to do something about it.
A summing up point on that, then we move on to the next round.
Yes, just very great question and great intervention, so I won't add much. Just want to qualify one point, which I'm not sure everyone in this audience understands. So machine learning, while it's branded as very flexible, it's actually very inflexible. So there's no learning by doing, right? There is a training part, and then is an application operational part, right? So if you train your model, your algorithm, on a certain set of fraud strategies or corrupt strategies, then the algorithm will learn those rules, right? And that's why the maintenance is very important, because if actors evolve, and they will evolve if you use the algorithms for enforcement, then your previous rules won't apply. So you have to retrain the machine, and the training your machines is the expensive and difficult part. Then the application is basically applying a set of given rules. That's usually much quicker and much cheaper. So maintenance is no way easy in this respect. Even if you say machine learning, well, it's learning with quite some limits.
Thank you. We will come back to that very key point. So thank you. That concludes round 2, and we're now to the final round 3, which is the lead up to lunch. You'll be excited to hear. So this is really now looking at like the future. So how do we really embed the things that we've been talking about here at a practical level and start scaling them to bring about institutional reforms and systemic change to actually help bring about these very much needed changes that we've been talking about. So, Marcelo, what do you think would be something in terms of your context that you would be focusing on in the next 6 to 12 months or so to give you those long-term scaling of the things that you've started to do now?
There's, I think, the way to really try to develop this in the future is you have to have an approach that is quite institutionalized. You see, in-house it's part of the job of the public sector authorities. So it's not just a project around. And basically, this used to be a single project that starts and ends in a single principles in that moment. No, you have to take this and be part of your work properly, your work in a daily basis, and you're still going to realize in the short term the difficulties. You're going to realize the limitations, and you're going to start to evolve this properly. but basically you have to take this as part of the daily basis work of the institution, and not just a project around that makes you to use the data that you have.
Beatrice?
Very quickly, I'm from a completely different perspective and much more long term. To me, the key is education and skills. We don't have the skills today. Law enforcement, as I said, and I hope not to hurt anyone, but they are still a bit like Dupont and Dupont. They are the old, or at least at Olaf, we have the very, very good, very super intelligent investigators that they will have a very good strategy, but they don't have the skills, the analytical skills to go and look for the data. So they still rely on us, on my directorate, which has these skills, but they should be the other way around. Everyone should be able to talk to the data, to manage the data, and have some other minimal number of people that are really the ones that might give you a very good expertise on a risk flag that you haven't seen. And today is the other way around. We're still not yet. We are very good investigators or very good analysts, and we need to do that. If we talk about algorithms, in Europe, for example, we don't have a lot of pioneer companies. We have a little bit, but not many. We need people to be able to do it, but we also need companies that give us data sets. Because if we buy the algorithm, the program, and we buy the data set, we don't understand what we are doing, and we don't understand what the computer is telling us to do, or what is showing us as a problem. So to me, it's education, education, education. We need to really shift and be much more data-driven and not be scared. Data is just normal. We are dealing with it on a daily basis. We just have to be relaxed and know how to talk to it. So to me, that's the key for the future.
Interesting. Yeah, I would completely agree. I think there's almost, and we've heard it several times this morning, of a different skill set that's required for the public sector, almost rebooting the DNA of the public servant, so that integrity, transparency, and digital are just natural parts of what you do.
And just very, very quickly, 6 years ago, when I joined the European Commission, my team of analysts, they were getting requests. Can you give me the phone number of Siemens? Because they will not Google it, because they were investigators. Now we don't get that. We get much more. Can you give me all the relationships of this person with this company? Fine, that's our job. But that was 6 years ago, where I arrived to the Commission, what people were asking my team. And I said, honestly? They said, I am an investigator. Okay. So we are shifting, but there is a lot of things to do.
Mihaly?
Yeah, great comments. So really just a few additions, maybe some of it's just building on what has been said already. So my first point on what the future may hold, and I hope it will hold, is once we start using the data, we realize how bad those data sets are, right? We need that ID. It was not obvious when we wrote this law why we need that ID, but now that we want to do analytics, well, without that ID, we cannot link to this, and this data sets. And then it's a small thing, but we have to fix it. We have to change the law, we have to change the standard template, and then our analytical needs will be met. So I think really, I was shocked how many times governments first honestly use the data, like, oh my God, is it in such a bad state? Like, really, we cannot identify all the public contracts held by Siemens, because you mentioned Siemens. Because we cannot, because it's written in 10 different ways, and there is no unique ID, and anyways, it's a large company. So without IDs, we are stuck, right? So I think that's going to hopefully create a virtuous circle. We use the data, we invest in the quality of data sets, and hence we can use them more. And the second thing, which I mentioned already, but I want to build on that, is embedding data and analytics in organizational processes, right? So once you run a data analytics project, it doesn't just sit as a nice, cute dashboard, but really there is someone in the organization, an analyst or someone from doing investigation, who is responsible for using that, disseminating it within the organization, embedding really in running day-to-day organizational processes. And in this sense, data analysis will move away from flagship reports to dashboards, search engines, standardized data reports, standardized data exports. And I think this is part of the shift. And finally, I think quick wins, focusing on the low-hanging fruits is really where we should start. I've seen a lot of data projects where, oh, there's this 100 things we want to do. I mean, most of the things are super difficult and takes a lot of resources, but actually there are a few things you can do in 4 weeks, right? Because the data is there, you can just download it, clean it up a bit, and start doing and show real value. And I think once you tackled the quick wins, once you harvested the low-hanging fruit, then you can build it up. But really start from something which is manageable and already adds value.
I think there's some really great comments that build on the things that we've been talking about as kind of common threads. And certainly something in the UK that we've embedded and are starting to scale is user-centered service design and agile delivery. How do you focus on the things that you know will deliver the most value to the user within the next couple of weeks or so? So I think there's not only is it about skills and capability, but there's also a cultural mindset about how do you try something that perhaps is different to what you've been used to. So encouraging experimentation, encouraging a little bit of measured risk taking because you're trying something new, and particularly where new and emerging technologies and data standards really enable this, providing the public servants and the officials can actually embrace that and do something very different for the value of the user. So I don't know if there's some experiences that you would like to share around how you encourage and support experimentation and how you take that and actually scale it to become something more strategic. Beatrice.
As I said, we are now embarking a project to doing our data lake, as we call it. But as I said, our investigators are really skilled in knowing what they are looking for. So when we open an investigation, it's because there is an allegation for corruption, for fraud, for whatever. And then they have very clear what they want to do. And then it's up to my team to really go and see what data is available, how we can use it, and then present it to them. And if they agree, we go and we analyze it. And what we see is that if you give my people no direction, they just swim in the data. They love it, and they will find you loads of fun things and interesting things. But we have, as you said, we have to know very clear what are we looking for and what is the purpose, because otherwise you can lose yourself in all the data you have and miss the purpose of your investigation. So you have to show all the possibilities, and we have endless possibilities, but you have to start for what are we looking for? What are we trying to prove? Because otherwise you get lost, and at the end you don't have time, and then you have lots of little evidence, but not the real evidence. So we just concentrate on the real important facts, and then the rest it will come. But by showing possibilities, you're also feeding the investigators with possibilities that they have not thought of. So it's a two-way process. But always keep in mind, as you said, what are we looking? Because otherwise, more data, you get lost. So.
How do you want to follow on to that?
Very well said. No, I would have wanted to follow on, but Beatrice said everything so well. So.
Marcelo, any points to add on kind of the culture of the public sector in supporting these kind of things and skills?
Yes, in this point, I think in several systems, transparency is part of the daily basis work, and that's a very good thing. But and transparency means that people can really know what the authorities are doing, know what the public servants are doing, why they took these decisions. And it comes in information, in data at the end. So the thing is how to really take advantage of that. And we have tried with these tools, but at some point we have to really try to, we are achieving somehow, but the majority of the system will be completely achieved when all this data can interoperate among them, can really talk together and show different things that they are doing now. That's why that's the aim of the last system that we're working on, and I show very quickly. But at the end, when people can really access to all this information, you have an effect there. You have effect in trust. You have an effect in believing in the system that we have measured actually in our surveys. we distinguish the people that have been exposed to the system, to the transparency system, the overall one, have higher level of trust with the public sector than the people that haven't been involved. And in a short term, in like, I don't know, 10 years, it's not, that's a short term, I think in these kind of things, people have said that it's more easy to detect corruption. There's a drop, there's an increase in the sense that the people believes in the system, and with all these tools and all these measures, they think that it's easier to detect corruption. And this is in the regular people and in the public sector, civil servants. We have service just for them. And they realize they are in the real world and they know what is going on in the public sector, and they believe that all these tools, measures, and systems have increased the possibility of really detect corruption and somehow stop the increasing of it.
Thank you, Marcelo, and thank you, panelists. So that comes to the end of round 3 for the panel discussions. So we open it up again to the floor for about 10 minutes of questions. So hand at the back and one at the front. So at the back first.
Hello, thank you. I'm Angeles Navarro, and I work at Open Datasoft, which is a startup company for open data. And my question would be in the sense of scaling up and linking it to the comment from the lady from Greece. Working at a cloud-based company, I see a lot of obstacles and a lot of resistance from governments, maybe not so much in Europe, but I'm in charge of Spain and I see it a lot. I see that sometimes governments pay a lot more to have, like, because they have this idea of having the hardware and having the data in their data center and in their office, no? So maybe those costs can be a lot higher, and there are a lot of companies such as ours, and there must be many others that also do a lot in all of these issues that can help governments. And how do you see how to overcome this resistance from governments to go into the cloud and to also accept, you mentioned a lot of in-house projects, and how to also turn to private sector for help. Thank you.
Beatrice.
Just to reassure you, the European Commission is going to the cloud. So, so that's something that we are doing as European Commission, okay, and some member states also. However, it's taking time because we need to make sure that we know where our data is stored. What we cannot have is if we go to do an inspection, or we need to control and to get data, that someone tell us, but this data is in Iceland, or this data is in Australia, so you cannot have it as a law enforcement. Or so we are trying to build also contracts with the cloud companies that allow us for traceability, to make sure that they are protecting our data, that we can get the data. So it is complex because of the legal system, but we know that mutualization and sharing the capacities is the way forward. It's too expensive if each of us wants to have our own data center, our own data analyst, etc. So we are aware, but I think that there is still some reticence because of maybe bad experiences that we experienced, some member states, some companies at the beginning. And it's easier to resist to give data to law enforcement when the data is a bit scattered everywhere. So we are getting there, but I think there is the policy, the procedures, and also the trust about reliability and about not sharing data with some other people, etc. So we're getting there, I would say. But it will come with time.
If I could just add on to that, because it's an area very close to my heart in terms of the UK and how we've helped to transform the relationship between the state and our supply chain. So it's very important that we, in exactly the same way that we have with citizens, we need to build trust with our citizens. We need to build trust in relationship between a much more diverse range of providers. And to your point of how do we encourage the government agencies to adopt the cloud, I think that comes also back down to capability and skills. Sometimes there's a low level of awareness of the opportunity, as well as the things that you need to do around security, threat prevention, etc., to enable you to fully embrace the public cloud. So in the UK, we have a public cloud first policy, so we have to look at that before any other options. So I think there's definitely some opportunities to share those kind of experiences across the globe, because we're all pretty much trying to do the same thing, aren't we, as governments? And we don't compete. So we can share this information and best practices. So yeah, I'm happy to talk about that over a break if you like. So suggest, question from the front here, if we can have a microphone. I'll borrow this one. Thank you.
Thank you. My question is for Beatrice. I'm a public prosecutor in Brazil, so from the perspective of law enforcement, the engineering of big data projects and the training of AI models sometimes is considered a black box by for those who study that. We have some good cases of technology applying to law enforcement, and in Brazil, the Lava Jato operation, the car wash operation is one good example of that. My question is about your experience. Is it possible to guarantee due process of law, transparency, and accountability in the use of these tech tools like big data, machine learning, artificial intelligence, to investigate and collect what I call e-evidence? And if so, how to do that? And I would like you to give some thoughts about the right to explanation on the GDPR, something.
Yeah, as I said before, if we don't understand the algorithm that is behind, then to me, we cannot make sure that we can use it. It has to be auditable, it has to be formalized, and it has to be have traceability in terms of decision making. Otherwise, it's a black box, as you said, and to me, then I wouldn't use it. Because if I don't understand the decisions that I'm taking or I am implementing because a machine is telling me, then I will be very worried, because that's what I said also before. There might be some bias that are embedded. And that's what I also link it to the skills. If we don't understand what we are buying from outside, or the set of data we are buying to train our machine or to test our machine, we don't know what we are doing. We don't know if at one moment something is going to unlock and then give us the wrong data, or to act in a way that is not correct. So, to me, it has to be auditable, traceable, and formalized, and that's why it's an investment. And then I give it to you, because you have to update it all the time. It's like a program at the end of the day. But if you don't understand, to me, it's useless.
Yeah, I completely agree. Just one additional point on this is that often, unfortunately, complexity and understandably the transparency represents themselves as a trade-off, because complex models tend to be more precise in terms of predictive power than simple and understandable models. So in some cases, we simply face the trade-off. Like, do we want something which we don't really understand but predicts super well, right? We can measure how well it predicts, but we don't know how it does it, right? Or we say we go with something less precise, less powerful in terms of prediction, but we understand it. It's, you can write it down a sheet of paper and here what we go. We don't have yet too many of these things, but as models become more complex, we will have more and more of these questions, and there's no straightforward answer to this trade-off.
Chantal, my colleague, nice and succinct, please, in the interest of lunch.
Thank you. So, hi, Chantal Donaldson-Foyer from the Government Digital Service. For disclosure, I work with Warren. I'm really interested to know how you engage with your users, particularly in the Chilean example, into making your platform user-friendly. how do you work with them to make sure that it works for them and it meets their needs? But even going further from that, we've been talking about analyzing data once we've got it, but what feedback mechanisms exist to make sure that the platforms and the systems that collect the data know what data is needed at the other end? And have you done any work in this regard? So I guess that's also for other two panelists. Thank you.
Yes, we in developing the system, we have this focus group, and we work with and surveys around NGOs, around people that is involved in these issues. Not surveys, not just, it's a large work, a discussion with them, joined separately. So there's plenty work on there just to try to get what they needed. Somehow they are using it. We have, in the info lobby, it's like 60,000 visits a month. Info Probidad is a little less, it's like 45,000. But it's plenty visits anyway, and they are using it in a daily basis. And you can say in the several times in the newspapers, it's just direct from our system that they show the information. So for us, the system is for them. It's for the people. It's not for us. It's meant to really disclose information and to show the data that we have in the proper way, and the data that we have, it doesn't mean that that is meant to really show in the beginning what we wanted. So we said here, we gathered the data, but we really were getting what we wanted from it. But later, because of the scale, because of the amount of data, we were able to change to really start to show what we wanted. So it's not that we managed to gather new data in a way that was more useful. We used the same data in a quite more useful way.
Any other comments?
Just a quick comment. So I think the answer to your question really depends on who is your user group. I think if you run a portal for the wide population, then it's a very different beast compared to developing something very targeted for auditors or whoever works in analytics in the government. And as another example, we have done a couple of projects with the World Bank, mainly Latin American data analytics projects. And there we also always made sure to start off from a user workshop, quite along the lines what Beatrice said, to help them understand their own questions and help us understand, okay, how can we use data to answer those questions. And once the analytical product is ready, you have a workshop where really every single detail is probed, you can understand the codes, the details, and I think this is where the detailed expert user feedback feeds back into the actual dashboard or data export, what have you.
Good, thank you. So I think we're now at the point where we just have to wrap up with some closing remarks from the panel. And I have a staged question for you. But if you could try to answer in about 2 minutes, that'd be fantastic. So from everything you've heard and your own perspective so far, how do you think international cooperation and collaboration between different government entities, between digital, between integrity groups, can actually help to tackle some of the issues that we've been talking about today? Mahaley, you want to go first?
Thank you for nominating me to go first. You're welcome. Yeah, many ways, but I would like to highlight just one point, which is corruption and fraud, in spite of all its national varieties, often happens in quite similar ways, and on the basis of how rules are circumvented and how corruption is really done. So sharing experience, analytical tools, codes even, or data sets, data points. I think this is very, very much an obvious way of learning across boundaries and borders.
Brilliant. Here.
Yeah. Well, of course, sharing is important because we have limited resources financially, but also in terms of professionals. So it's important that we share the skills and the tools that we have. But for that, we have to develop trust. So for me, trust is something that we really need to work on, and not to be healthy competitors, but not not put first our own organization in front of the others, and then, you know, it's just not the way forward.
Absolutely. Marcelo?
We're talking about about data, and the more the better. The more the better. So if you can really take advantage of data that is abroad in a proper way, in a trustful environment, I think it's going to be at the service of transparency, of integrity, of the combat of corruption. But and that means in the future interoperability. That means standardization. That means several new things that in this point we should start to talk about, because the amount of data is not a problem anymore. You can have tons of data with the new tools. You can use it properly, and we have to try to really collaborate in this, because corruption as well is quite international issue in this point.
Thank you. So it only remains for me to give my 3 penneth worth. As a sum up, I think I've been talking with the OECD for a number of years now, with the Working Party for Senior Digital Officials, and I think we've been looking at what we can share in terms of what's worked, but equally, and if not sometimes more important, what hasn't worked. I think it's very easy to kind of sugarcoat. Well, this looks great and this sounds to work, but if we can share the experiences, the failures with others, so that they don't have to make the same mistakes as what we may have done, I think is hugely valuable. And we've spoken a lot about the constant evolution of services, of threats, of capacities, and I think it's really key that if we are currently behind the curve from a threat perspective, we actually get in front of the curve and we can preempt, and I think that comes back down to skills and capability. It's like, so that we actually know, right, well, we've actually hacked our own systems because we've put ourselves in the shoes of the perpetrators. So I think there's a huge thing to do around how we build that capability, and I think it is an investment that governments need to make in that skills, because actually it's all about the people at the end of the day, isn't it? So invest in our people; they're our greatest asset, and I think that it's part of society as well. So without further ado, it's lunchtime now, and I know if you look in your packs in here, there's a plethora of options, some al fresco, some interior, so fill your boots with what the options are, and see you later. Thank you very much.